That was where he was at. And Paul used that and moved in that to the point that he was literally out persecuting Christians. And you only know some of this because of things he says later on. He looks back. We know he didn't just throw people in prison and have them whipped. He killed some of them. There were literally Christians who lost their lives because of Saul the Jew, which is what he was at the time, who he was at the time. So this is the man, and this was his concept of God. But think what happened as he came into contact with God. First of all, of course, we know he had a blinding revelation, literally, on the road to Damascus. He encountered this Christ of whom he writes in a supernatural way, and he just was absolutely, his world fell in pieces. It crumbled around him like so much rubble. And he was thrown into 3 days that I can only imagine what they must have been like. 3 days waiting. What's going to happen? Everything I have lived for has been a lie. This God is a God of wrath. I know him. I know he's a God of wrath. And here I have not only committed sins, I have killed his followers. I have been his enemy. You actually think that he would sit there for 3 days and the devil would just be quiet and smile? And no, he was being bombarded. Have you ever been in a place like that where God brings you up short or circumstances just pound you, and all of a sudden, what does the devil do? He will drive you crazy if you let him, with dark, negative, condemning, hopeless, life is over kind of thoughts. I can only imagine what Paul went through thinking about, what's he going to do with me? Oh, everything I know about God says I'm in trouble, big trouble. But when God came and revealed himself to Paul through his servant Ananias, it was not with angry denunciation. It was not with thunders of condemnation. It was with open hands of mercy. To say, Paul, I'm bringing you into my purpose. You're not only going to be received and loved and cherished by me, but I want to make you an instrument of a purpose that I can see from the foundation of the world. Paul's knowledge of God, the thing that's behind a word like praise, think about it. Yes. Paul knew something that a lot of people don't know. They think of God in such scary, negative terms. He's the killjoy. He's the party pooper. I don't know if do they still use that expression anywhere? I guess that dates me a little bit. And when I grew up, that was a popular expression for somebody that just kind of, you got something going and they want to mess it up. And of course, where I grew up, it wasn't party pooper, it was patty pooper. It was in eastern Massachusetts. They talk different up there. They park their cars and... But anyway, I'll tell you, Paul didn't see God as the party pooper in the sky. This is not a reaction of fear. Think about it. This is a man who had revelations of God, as I said earlier, that few of us will ever have this side of the veil, if any of us. God singled him out to reveal himself in such depth and such breadth that Paul could only he's at a loss for words to know how to express the greatness and the wonderfulness of this God. That's something that needs to capture our hearts, folks. We need to be excited. Yes. Paul wasn't just blasé about his faith. It was something that drove him. It was something that captured his heart and drove his passion. I love this God. I serve him. I want you to know how wonderful he is. There's nothing more wonderful. But you think about the testimony of a man who knows, who's been there. He's not just studying this in some seminary. This is a man who spent time alone with this God. Think of what he says in 2 Corinthians chapter 12, I think it is. He talks about a time when he was caught up to the third heaven, heard things he couldn't even express. He couldn't even put into words the things that he was allowed to see. And we're talking about the testimony of a man who's been there, who has a deep, personal revelation of the character and purpose of God. I'll tell you, I want to take that to heart, don't you? This is a God who's worthy of my praise, worthy to be loved, worthy to be served. Paul doesn't come back and say, well, I've seen something about God. I'll tell you, he's pretty scary. But here's a religion. Now, if you'll follow this religion carefully, you can sort of tiptoe around his wrath and get into heaven, by the skin of your teeth. It's not that at all. There's none of that sense. Yes, I know there's a fear. There's a holy reverential fear that we are called to have toward God. He's a great and a mighty and a powerful God. But Paul didn't focus on that here. He's focusing on the amazing grace, the amazing love that he was shown. I don't know when this dawned on Paul, but he writes to Timothy, he says, this is a true saying, worthy of all acceptance. God saves sinners. Christ came into the world to save sinners, but he didn't stop there. He said, of whom I'm chief. Part of what got Paul so excited was the idea is this: if God can save me, he can save anybody. And so he went forward with a confidence to preach a God who could reach the lowest of the low, and that's what he considered himself. If God can save me, he can save anybody. I want you to know how wonderful he is. I want you to know what a great God he is. You need to come into his presence with joy, with thankfulness, and with a humbleness of heart, but with praise. This is not a God you need to cower before and try to, he's a great God. He's someone you can love. He's someone you can just enter into a deep relationship. You will have no higher joy than knowing him. He goes on to talk about the blessings, every spiritual blessing in Christ. And there's an awful lot packed into that. But I think about the choice Paul had, if you want to call it that. Paul was like a man who had a treasure that he thought was very great, very important. In reality, he was like a man playing with sticks and stones in the dirt, talking about the greatness of his treasure. And all of a sudden, God comes along and opens a door and shows him silver and gold and diamonds and rubies and of every kind of treasure you can think of, as far as he could possibly see. It just didn't have an end. And he looked back at his rocks and sticks and said, my God, what have I been doing? That's just garbage. My religion, garbage. My social standing, garbage. I've seen something that is so great. That's the message we need. We don't need to say, you're going to go. You better believe in this God because you're going to go to hell one day if you don't. That is a twisting. That's an emotional twisting of the message. I'll tell you what. Yes, if people harden their hearts against the love of this God, there's nothing he can do but pour out his wrath. Some people wonder, how can God be such a great and loving and wonderful God and yet be a God of wrath? I'll tell you what, the measure of goodness, the measure of all that is right is the utter stand against what is wrong. How can God be a holy and pure God? How can he stand for what is good and what is right if he does not hate what is evil? Our sin is a cancer in God's universe. Yes, it is. And God, what kind of a God would it be who said, well, okay, I'll excuse you. I'm feeling good today. I'll just let you off. God doesn't just excuse sinners. How many of you know that? Sang the song a while ago about mercy and justice. I can't remember the words now. Anyway, that God is both merciful and just. Do you know if he forgives you, he's not just excusing you. Do you understand that? You understand the gospel? God has never excused the first sin.